of us who live in Dearborn, right, there's a bubble. Come on, it's not that bad. Or we think that there's a separation between what? We think that, here we go. We think that there's a separation between what we see on television and what is really happening in Dearborn, right? So we can go to Salat al-Jum'ah, there's no issue. You know, you can wear hijab in this city. If you go to the public schools, half of your teachers are of similar background. That's just not the case if you travel, you know, 10 miles, arguably, in any direction. It's just not the case. So on the one hand, I think then that's caused folks in Dearborn to rightfully think that there's something special about the city, and I think there is. But on the other hand, it's, as he said, it's created really a situation where the Muslimin in Dearborn are, you know, their own bubble of insulation where they don't necessarily know, or some don't care, quite frankly, what's happening to the larger Muslim community and what type of trends we're seeing. So bigots are not likely going to come smack to Dearborn Public Schools and mistreat a fourth grader there, right? Because 90% of the class is named Muhammad or Ali or Hassan. But, you know, if you go to Livonia, as an example, if you go downriver, which is, you know, we're willing to go there for shopping, right, or for a restaurant, but the reality is our community there is also having trouble. I just wanted to point out, I'm from Dearborn, no problems with Dearborn, but there's something about our city that is great, and we've done a lot of good for this community, but it also has created a situation where people think that, you know, everything is peachy for Muslimin, and it's not. So back to Islamophobia. It's an industry, meaning for those who are business people in here, it's a packageable industry. You know, I guess my water bottle is what I keep using an example of. It's something packaged and sold. So it's a commodity, effectively. You know, I'm using the term loosely, but that is sold, and it's sold under fear. So when we say, why do they hate us, or why is there such hatred towards Muslimin, it's not that difficult to decipher. It's because fear sells, and the boogeyman, so again, outside of Dearborn, Muslimin are the boogeyman, right? We're the boogeyman, meaning there's this invisible notion that Muslims are lurking in the midst, right? So there's Sharia law in Dearborn. This is a very widespread notion that we operate. So I'm a lawyer, so there's a notion that I go to court in Wayne County, and I'm not licensed by the state of Michigan. I'm licensed by Sharia law. I mean, that's just, it's an absurd notion because it's far from the fact, and it's absurd because there's been such a vilification of Sharia law. I mean, I don't know exactly that Fox News commentators are up for deciding what Sharia law is, but there's a subtle aggression there, meaning if you are subscribing to the Sharia, right? If you pray, if you subscribe to, you know, Islamic law, and I'm proud to say I do. I mean, I'm proud to say I subscribe to my faith, then that's a problem. So you see all the underlying aggression. If they in Dearborn run things under Sharia law, and then even if we're agreeing on what that Sharia law looks like, that it's a problem to be a practicing Muslim to begin with. So you'll have places in the South, not only in the South, really across the country, where they're introducing legislation to make sure that there's no Sharia law, but there's not even a Muslim within 80 miles of where the legislation is being introduced. It's just straight hatred. So think about it. They're introducing legislation to make sure there's no Sharia law in an area, in a town in which there's not even Muslims in 80, you know, within certain miles anyway. It's just this preemptive, you know, hysteria associated with the Muslims are coming, you know, like the boogeyman, they're coming. So it's important for us, I think, to just acknowledge that it is in fact an industry, so you can sell it. You can sell fear, because the media often, you know, for two reasons. I think on the one end of the spectrum, the media is very busy, so it's like time for hurry. They need to get their story on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's this industry that has benefited from the hatred of Muslimin. Just benefit. You know, there's these people that do that for a living. You know, so some of us for a living go around and talk to our community, talking about your rights, your hukuk, etc. There's Islamophobes that for a living get paid a very pretty penny, get paid a lot more money than any of us ever will, I think, to really spread propaganda about Muslimin, and they know their talking points, and we know them, we know their talking points. And so what you end up happening is, even when we teach a course on Islam, or I teach a course on Islamic law, for instance, you end up spending so much time undoing what Islam is that we're always in defensive posture, that we're not able necessarily to even tackle what Islam is. So if a syllabus is 14 weeks long, I end up spending 8 weeks talking about what Islam is not. You've heard this verse, these are different interpretations. This is what you've read on women, this is the alternative view. Do you see that means? So we as a community find ourselves often in a constant state of having to defend or to undo all the information and the misinformation, as opposed to being like other communities that can actively engage and share who they are and what their faith is. Very important when folks are constantly on the defense and feel like they have a defensive posture. I don't know how I'm doing on time with that. I never know how I'm doing on time. So I see a lot of young people in here, and I think the young people, the young Muslims, folks like Amanda and others, are really going to continue to chip away at Islamophobia, because what you do, when you're great at what you do, when you're decent at what you do, when you're a good neighbor, your actions do way more than any fancy speech the rest of us can give up here forever. I'll be very honest. You are your own agents of chipping away at anti-Muslim sentiment. And it's going to be, the tools are in your hand. How you conduct yourself, how you rise above altercation. When somebody says something and you want to, if you're in a debate about whatever sensitive subject, my time as a student, it was the Arab-Israeli conflict, right? I think now people have different debates about all sorts of stuff. Our ability, remember, we're Muslimin, bound first by our own morality and sense of decency that's guiding. And just important that I want I'm sure you all know this, but we always need a reminder, myself included, that we're agents of and representations of our faith, particularly if you're a Masjid, right? You leave the city of Dearborn, people are watching, they want to see how your kind behaves, how intelligent you are, or how appropriate you are, how mannered you are, just to be very direct. Very important, very, very important. So while on the one hand we're trying to learn about Islamophobia, we must also look at ourselves and reassess and constantly check the ways in which we can be better representatives of our faith and better Muslimin in general, with me being the first that needs to work on that. And then as on the topic of Islamophobia, for the young folks in here, not only young people, not only talking to young people, but the younger people in here are often looking for guidance or direction. I know that when I was a student, I learned Arabic from everybody. Nobody was an Arab. So every one of my professors at Michigan or at Harvard were never Arab or Muslimin. Think about that. You'd learn Arabic, and you'd learn Islamic history, and you'd learn the Middle East conflict, whatever subject relating to our ancestors or our areas of concern, were never taught by our own community. And what does that mean? That meant that, for good or for bad, that the slant and the bias is necessarily from somebody who is not from that region, doesn't even have roots in that region, certainly is not a Muslim, let alone a practicing Muslim. So you would be taught a course on gender in Islam, or which is women in Islam, by non-Muslim women. And that's not to say that you have to be Muslim, particularly in academia, to be a great academic. And it's not to say that you have to be of Arabic background to teach Arabic, but you can see how that would create some problems, right? So this was, in the 90s, and a lot of it is because we don't value being a professor, right? We don't value necessarily education, because professors don't make a lot of money, right? Because they're busy publishing and writing and thinking, because we value, oftentimes, people with a title, like a doctor, right? Or a businessman, or bigger is better. And just to be very real, that's a problem. And that's why I learned Arabic from non-Arabs and non-Muslims. This is why you studied Islamic history, or you look at all these courses now are often, it's better now, but for a long time it was just other communities talking about us. Think about that. want to know roots of Islamophobia, the classroom itself that is teaching Islam or history or language is not led or done by the very people, you know, who have the best stake in the matter. So that's important. So for anybody even interested or considering a career in, you know, academia or writing or history, you know, I'd love to support it. I know, and look into the role you can play really for a community, because there's a lot of void in the classroom, and that's where the thinking begins. So I don't always need to use all my time. I'll end it short. I appreciate you all being here, and if you have any questions, I'm available.
Okay, you can clap. It's okay. So next up, inshallah, will be Brother Dawood.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wal-aqibatu lil-muttaqeen. Wa la udwana illa ala al-zalimin. Wa afdalu salati wa atamu taslim ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina wa habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tahirin wa ashabihi al-mukhlisin wa tabi'ina lahum bi khairin wa ihsan ila yawm ad-din wa amma ba'd. Brothers and sisters in Islam, let me say it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you this morning. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless each and every one of you, protect all of your families, and may Allah Azza wa Jal help the mustad'afeen all throughout the world, from Palestine, Yemen, and all of the places in which injustices are taking place towards the Muslims. Ameen. My primary focus is not to exclude our elders, but my primary focus is talking to the younger people who are here in the audience, and in my attempt to try to reframe our outlook of Islamophobia, or what Islamophobia is. And I say that because for most of the time, especially since post 9/11, from my perspective, I've come to the conclusion that we've been dealing, for the most part, with only a symptomatic approach, or dealing with symptoms of Islamophobia and not dealing with the actual root causes or the disease of Islamophobia. So we're very reactive, and we've been very busy putting out fires and really being driven with a lot of emotion, not intellectual analysis, and not things that are really rooted in the basics of Islam. So first point I want to stress is to know and understand that when Allah Azza wa Jal wants to complete his favor upon a group of people, that he tests them and he delivers them into the hands of their adversaries. He tests them and he delivers them in the hands of their adversaries. If you look at Musa alayhi salam, if you look at Yusuf alayhi salam, who was put into a well and then who was taken out of the well and then ended up being put in jail in Egypt. These prophets, you cannot look at a prophet in the Quran or any of the awliya Allah, the friends of Allah, except that they went through extreme tests and hardship for Allah Azza wa Jal to complete his ni'mah upon them. This is sunnatullah. What we're going through is sunnatullah. And Allah Azza wa Jal talks about this in Surah Al-Asr, right? That human beings, the insan, is astray in this life and doomed in the next life. That this is what al-khusr means. It means ad-dolal wal-halak. Except those who integrate 4 different points. Iman, from a theoretical perspective, then from a practical perspective. We have an ilmi and an amali. Then they do righteous deeds. They take their faith out of the theoretical realm into the practical realm. This is our deen, brothers. This is what we're taught by our scholars. Then in the mutual enjoining of rights, of truth. In order to enjoin truth and rights, you have to be willing to receive. It's reciprocity. With all rights comes responsibilities. And then the mutual enjoining of temperance or perseverance, because any group of people who are involved in being upright people, being decent people, will have adversaries and be tested, and this is where they have sabr so that they can stay the course, not give up, nor take easier, softer routes that go outside of our Sharia. Okay? So this is number one. And this takes spiritual training and a spiritual disposition. This is not something we can fake intellectually. This is something that's a matter of faith that relates to our tarbiyah and also our suhbah, who we keep company with to fortify each other in these times that we live in. Number two, the literal definition of Islamophobia, as Attorney Fatima mentioned, would literally mean a fear of Islam or Muslims, or a phobia. We can say it's irrational. But let me also put forth the notion to you, or put forth or suggest to you, that the major root of Islamophobia is not misunderstanding about Muslims or Islam. It is not. It is not in America. If you understand what our country was built upon, our country was built upon a system of white supremacy. The United States of America was built upon a system of white supremacy, and religion has always been racialized in America. And this whole thing about Muslim ban, there's been several times in United States history where there have been targeted policies to block immigrants. Two different Chinese exclusion acts. 1907 Expiation Act, where actually American women got stripped of their citizenship if they married a so-called foreigner. The 1924 Immigration Act that basically blocked immigration of Muslims to this country from 1924 to 1965. So when I hear people say that this so-called Muslim ban and what Trump is doing is un-American, that lets me know they don't understand American history. Because this, what's going on now, is a repetition of American history. This is America's apple pie, what's going on right now. There's always been groups that have been targeted who have not been viewed as quote-unquote white enough. And whiteness in America does not mean skin color. Irish people at one time in America were not considered white. There's a book about this called How the Irish Became White. Irish people had their own separate box when they immigrated here during the potato blight or potato famine. They weren't white. Italian people weren't white, and their religion, Catholicism, did not become a white religion until about 50 years ago in America, socio-politically. So what we are dealing with right now in the increase of Islamophobia is just a tree, a branch on the tree of American structural racism. America has two faces. We have this Constitution that is well written and has beautiful language that has never been equally applied to all people. And people who are considered non-white have never received full rights. It's important for you to understand, because then this will influence the long-term gain we need to dismantle or fight against Islamophobia. Islamophobia is just racism, for the most part. So within this context, brothers and sisters in Islam, and I'm going to try to end early as well, many of us look at Islamophobia from the individual level. And there is individual bigotry against Muslims, but then there is state-sponsored Islamophobia, or what we can call institutionalized Islamophobia. The institutionalized Islamophobia that tries through planning commissions and zoning commissions, like that blocked a couple of years ago selling a campground to a Muslim of Arab American background, and they blocked it in the upper part of the state, saying that he was going to potentially have a terrorism training camp, like 10-year-old, 12-year-old boys were going to a camp to learn to be terrorists. That's how they blocked it. Pittsfield Township, Sterling Heights, the problems that Iona has had over the years in Warren, the problems the Muslims had, and Novi on the local level. This is institutionalized. This is something structural. This isn't just about individuals. Discrimination on state levels. People who are incarcerated. Services for returning citizens. State agencies specifically placing Muslim children with non-Muslims of particular backgrounds, knowing that they're going to go and take those kids and send them to church, knowing that they are going to feed them pork, like an issue we did with the Mauritanian family. where the Mauritanian kids got sent to a house of an evangelical Christian home, knowingly, and they were sending them and feeding them khinzir, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and taking them to church. And then on the federal level, relating to domestic policy and foreign policy, white folks don't get droned by the U.S. government. Yemenis get killed in drone attacks. Pakistanis get killed in drone attacks. Somalis get killed in drone attacks because they aren't considered white folks, therefore their lives aren't valued as much because America doesn't send drones to Crimea or Ukraine. We don't do that, much less CVE and harassment by Customs Border Protection, which means, brothers and sisters in Islam, from a long-term strategy, we Muslims cannot solve our problem alone. Black people, whether Muslims or not Muslims, have been dealing with this for a very long time. Anti-black racism, anti-Latino xenophobia, right? Racism that South Asians face who aren't Muslims, from the Hindu, Sikh community. Native Americans, who are historically the most oppressed people in this land. Our government is still breaking treaties with the Native American people with the Keystone Pipeline. 95% of their population was killed, established in this country. 96% of their land was stolen. So we cannot solve our problem as Muslims by ourselves. If we cut down and work with other people to dismantle white supremacy or cut down the tree of structural racism, we will de facto solve our problem. But if we think we're going to solve our problem in isolation, or we don't need to worry about what's going on in Detroit or Flint and poison water, or we don't have to worry about Latinos and immigration raids, then we have a sad misunderstanding. Justice cannot be about just us. The way of the Prophet ﷺ was not just being concerned about justice for Arab or Muslim only. This is our way, this is our deen. Same thing with Umar ibn Khattab, Ali ibn Abi Talib. The other point is, and I will conclude with the few minutes that I have left, is that in our mental realignment, I believe there's two things that are fundamental for us. There's two things that we need to increase. First is ibadah. Ibadah. The second, besides that, is al-khidma lil-nas. Not al-khidma lil-muslimin or al-khidma lil-arab. That we as a community in these times, we need to run to our Lord Allah Azza wa Jal. Now is the time for us to hide our faith. Now is our time to run to our Lord Allah Azza wa Jal, to weep at night, to make the hajjud, to increase our dhikr, to increase our dua, and to increase the gatherings of learning in which we learn about our deen, and we also do outreach and invite people to learn about this deen. But we have to learn our deen properly, right? Islam cannot be, firstly, a social-political expression. It has to be an expression of our faith, firstly. Many Muslims these days treat Islam like a social-political expression. If you believe me, just see the Muslims who celebrate the guy who has the CNN show, who eats human brains and says he's a Muslim and drinks alcohol out of a human skull, or Muslims saying Oscar's so Muslim to someone who believes there was a messenger after Nabi Muhammad and who got an award for an Oscar playing a 10-minute role being a drug dealer, helping someone through their homosexuality, helping them be comfortable with gay lifestyle. And Muslims are celebrating this stuff. And that shows we have a problem. The other thing is, in khidmah for the people, or serving the people, Islam always spread to the du'afa first, not the aristocrats. Our hearts should be connected firstly with the most marginalized people in our country and the poorest people in our society. This is where Islam spread, and the acceptors of the early prophets, or all prophets from Nuh alayhi salam to Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam, it was always the du'afa. It was always the weak people. So this is the ground of where our khidmah starts, and we do this out of sincerity, not as PR gimmicks. We should go and help people. We don't need TV cameras and press releases every time we go to want to educate some people or help give people job education or feed people. I'm so tired of Muslim community and PR gimmicks. Mish ikhlas. Allah Azza wa Jal does not reward riyah or showing off or ostentation. Ikhlas is what Allah Azza wa Jal rewards. And with that, I'll stop.
Okay, next up is Amanda.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. So I just want to talk a little bit about my experience as a Muslim woman in America and what led me to start Dinner with Your Muslim Neighbor. So growing up, I'm born and raised in Dearborn, Michigan. I lived in a safety bubble, and I did not realize that until my husband and I moved to Seattle about 5 years ago. And when I got there, there was a very small population of Muslims who were living, and there were a lot of people who were very curious and interested in what it was, that I was wearing on my head. And while they were very progressive and liberal in Seattle and Washington State as a whole, there was some very challenging experiences that I went through while living there. So during MasterChef, having that national platform for a Muslim woman, there were a lot of people, as expected, that came out on Twitter and Facebook and just provided hate and Islamophobic rhetoric, anti-Muslim rhetoric, without even knowing me, just based on how I was dressed and what I was doing. Combine that with the presidential campaign and everything else, I was like, oh my goodness, what are we gonna do? I can't just sit back and have a pity party like, oh, poor me, like this is so hard. We know that this is part of our Islam and part of a test of our faith is to struggle, but what are we gonna do with that struggle? So, firstly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that He will not change the condition of a person until we look within ourselves. So it started with me at home, and what can I do to be a better Muslim and practice my faith more strongly? And second, how do we relate that to our community and to the people who are living right next door to us? Like so many of us, we create safety bubbles and we surround ourselves with people who look like us, who think like us, who believe like us. But I think one of the most important aspects of our faith is to create allies and friends with our neighbors who don't look like us or don't believe like us. And what does that friendship actually entail? We need to take a deeper dive. It's not just the person sitting next to us in university that we have a casual conversation with. They might ask us about our hijab and, during Ramadan and about our salah. But how do we bring them to our homes and actually bridge that gap and teach them what it is to be a Muslim, so that there isn't that fear? I think there's a rise of Islamophobia because 63% of Americans believe they haven't met a Muslim. And I think that number might be much lower, it's just that people don't know, that not all Muslims wear hijab, or if a man doesn't have a beard, he might also still be Muslim. So we have to do our part in combating this and really create the space and opportunity for people to meet Muslims and get to know us on a really deep level. Like, we should be bringing them to our Masjid, and we should be bringing them to these sorts of events, because that's how we're going to bridge the gap. As a social worker, one of the therapies that we learned about in school, psychotherapies that we learned about to combat a phobia, is exposure therapy. So we know that if someone has a phobia, that over time with multiple exposures, that phobia will lessen and decrease and hopefully be eliminated. So why don't we do that, to help combat Islamophobia? And these are just little things that all of us can do. It's, reaching out and bridging that gap. So how do we take action as everyday Muslims who might not have a huge platform and might not be, speaking on talk shows and having, such a large platform to share? We know that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that even a smile is charity. And through our dinners, we learned that a lot of non-Muslims have smiled at Muslims and that hasn't been reciprocated, which makes me sad, but let's be the initiators of that. Like, that's our teachings. Let's share that, just a simple smile. And I think we all have a gift and we all have a talent, whether it be food or art or whatever it is you're good at. Share that with someone who's non-Muslim. But I think food is a very powerful tool. All of us have to eat and nourish ourselves. And I might be biased, but I think our food is like the best food, so let's share that with others and help bridge that gap. So after experiencing Islamophobia firsthand, where people in the store said they were fearful of me and that they were buying rifle racks to save themselves from people like me, to protect themselves from someone like me, I said we need to do something. So I like to cook. I think I'm good at cooking. Let's have a dinner and invite non-Muslims into our home and create a safe space for them to ask questions and just learn about Islam. And one way you can not be on the defensive is by setting the tone. Like, this dinner is so that you can learn about us, and I'm going to start by sharing the tenets of our faith and why we believe what we believe, and then we'll get to the questions. So set the foundation, and when you're in your home, you're able to set the tone and be more in control of that dialogue. And everyone's feeling a little vulnerable, and that's totally okay and expected, and that's what you want, because that's when people can speak truth and are not just reciting, these little media phrases that they've been taught and that sort of thing. And that's when you get down to the truth and the real essence of what we want to be doing. There are so many things, that we can say about Muslims and about American Muslims and about women in Islam, but I think just meeting someone where they're at and having that dialogue and providing the safe space for that is so important and so key. And I'm going to wrap up just so that we can have lots of time for questions and we can discuss the dinners further and all that. Thank you.
Next up is Brother William.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So my talk is on dawah in the age of Islamophobia and bigotry. So I'm going to reference an ayah from the Quran. We're all familiar with Surah Al Imran, ayahs 102 to 105, but ayah 103, and we've all heard this. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Right, we know this is, hold fast all of you to the rope of Allah and be not divided. So let's think about that for a second. Because in order to discuss this subject, we must begin with ourselves and our identity. Okay? Not just as Muslims, but beyond that. So we have to think about that rope. Is it the Habil al-Yami that we're holding on to? The Habil al-Pakistani? The Habil al-Arab? No. It should be the rope of Allah that we need to hold on to, firstly. Any other rope is useless. Brothers and sisters, my elders, I say this with respect. Okay, think about something. There's no flags in the Akhirah, right? I mean, Allahu Alam, maybe in Jahannam, I don't know. May Allah protect us all from the hellfire. So we have to really think about what's the other parts of our identity. If we put ourselves as Muslims first, well, we have to look at our earth, our culture, right? This is a key thing for us, right? And we have to look at it aside from our ethnicity. We have to consider and clarify what exactly is it, okay? Now, we don't have to give up our culture to succeed in Islam. That's important, we know that, we should know that. But we do have to separate it from nationalism and the superiority feelings that can come with that. Okay, it's important to understand that. So, what I want to tell you is that it's okay to be American, okay? Because this is a culture and a place with a culture and a worldview that Muslims from here share, okay? This country has a long history of Islam and Muslims woven into it from early explorers that came before the Europeans, to slavery, to the influence on laws that we use today. And sister, she can confirm that. We have laws that were influenced by Islam, okay? And of course, when there was positive immigration from successful Muslims who were workers, teachers, and inventors. So being patriotic about it, it's okay. Of course, there's the other side of our history, as Dawood talked about. There's a lot to know about where we live. But Islam does not forbid patriotism. There was a great Islamic scholar here in America that I'm going to quote. His name was Ismail al-Faruqi, rahimahullah. And he was originally from Palestine, but he overcame these, and he was a very high intellectual thinker. And so I'm going to quote him, and he said that patriotism is the love, compassion, and responsibility one feels towards his neighbors, fellow tribesmen, and region. Islam appreciates these feelings but condemns them when patriotism becomes nationalism, qawmiya in Arabic, which is both anti-Arab and anti-Muslim. He further said that nationalism is the committed enemy of Islam, for it divides the peoples of the Ummah against one another. And we just got to look over the 20th century. We know this, right? But do we think about this every day? So to further clarify, it's okay for a Muslim from the American culture to be a Muslim from the American culture and even be patriotic. It doesn't mean you're taking a political position or party. Islam fits for all places and all times. Remember that. It's eternal. And our Islam does not have to be reduced or compromised for this. And we have the freedom to live Islamically here in America, more so than probably almost every Muslim majority country. And I think most of you will confirm that if you think about it. Okay, I've been overseas to many countries, and this is the best place to be a Muslim. Every opportunity is here for us for our deen. But we have to be able to differentiate between assimilation and integration. This is where we get tripped up. So I'm going to give you the textbook definition of both of those. So to begin with, assimilate. Absorb people, ideas, or culture into a wider society or culture. Okay? And then integrate, bring people or groups with particular characteristics or needs into equal participation or in membership of a social group or institution. Can you guys see the difference? Absorb versus integrate with equal participation. That's the difference. Okay, we've already been living here, living Islam in some form or another, contributing to and influencing the fabric of this society and makeup of its laws and learning institutions for centuries. That's true. Any and all history involving Muslims and Islam, whether it has to do concerning the Africans that were brought here as slaves against their will, or the Syrians and Yemenis who came as auto workers, it's yours. This is all your history. You own it. You own it as Americans, because it's American history, so every American owns it. You guys need to take on it. It doesn't matter what the background of any individual or what the history in America. If it involves Islam, this is first and foremost your history. It's American history, okay? And there's lots of books that you can read and study about it. We can talk about that afterwards. So this is the first point. We have to look at ourselves. So now to move on, we have to look at the Islamic community and how are we viewing ourselves. Okay, and I'm going to quote a couple of ayah I pulled out from the Quran, from Surah Al-Ahqaf. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون أولئك أصحاب الجنات خالدين فيها جزاء بما كانوا يعملون. Surely those who say our Lord is Allah and then stay firm, they will have no fear nor shall they grieve. Those are the people of paradise who will live forever as a reward for what they used to do. So to contemplate that, there's lots of ayat in the Quran that talk about us being firm in our iman. But having the dhikr of Allah in these times, in these really troubling times, this is our jihad in us. This is the struggle. Okay? And having confidence in our deen and ourselves privately and openly is key. We have to have confidence in our deen. Be contemplating it and show it. Okay? That doesn't mean, being arrogant. It means being confident with our deen openly, not afraid to be Muslim. Okay, it's to combine our intellectual awareness of our deen and the danger we face, maintaining our iman with the Most High. This is the balance we need to achieve. We have to be strong in our trust of Allah, but smart and conscious of what's happening around us. This is the part of the reason why we have to focus on improving the Islamic view of our community. We have to support ourselves in a jama'ah way, in a collective way. We need to reach out, build bridges with other communities, especially if they're ethnically different. It's imperative that we build and increase unity across all ethnic and social lines. Now, this is part of the work I do. Dawood can tell you all about it. I'm also a member of MMCC, a lot of the Masjid. Imam Mustafa, our Amir, he's the co-chair of the Imams Council. This is an effort that's ongoing to keep Imams in connection with each other. There's a project that goes on during Ramadan, Muslim building bridges. Maybe you're familiar with it. Brother tries to get youth to go to different masajid, visit from the city to the suburbs to the city. You know, there's a lot of efforts that you guys can join, make your own, okay? We have to stop dividing ourselves based on cultural, you know, or ethnic identity. There's nothing, we're all Muslims. Go visit a different masjid, you'll see. So now, once we get past that, we have to look at ourselves and see how we should view our identity and obligations going outward, okay? How would we project ourselves? In order to stave off the Islamophobia, we have to understand its root is also xenophobia, which is like the fear of foreigners, of outsiders. So we have to combat that image, a narrative that we are the other and not part of the common culture, mindset, or worldview here in America. Now, there are those who are simply ignorant, you know, who buy into the fear because of their own deficiencies in their own lives. You know, it's easy to fear what they don't know, okay? And usually, and I've seen so much of this, particularly my outreach work and our work, once they meet a Muslim, most of that stuff is dispelled. Most of those myths and extreme, you know, pictures that are painted about our community, they're dispelled, okay? So many times, you know, rarely do I see that not happen. You know, once contact is made, they see the humanity and the realness, and they need to see the Islamic character added to that. And then they say, oh, wow. You know, because a lot of people in this country, I mean, this is a materialistic society. You know, this society is full of munkar. People are away from God so much. So when they see a good practicing Muslim, this has a profound effect. They have respect for us, okay? If we're showing the right character. You know, and there are people who are easily affected by the hyperbole. They can just as easily be affected by the positive that you put forward. So it's crucial that we can be seen part of the culture and society here. If those elements that are propounded, that are used to make us look like the outsider and the foreigner are taken away, we're accepted as American, not a harmful or enemy group that's plotting some sort of devious, you know, takeover or whatever. This is why we have to really listen to the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we need to repel a bad deed with something better, as the ayat in Surah Al-Fusilat says. These are ayat 34 to 36. For brevity, I'll just explain the English. Good and evil are not equal. Repel evil with what is best, and you will see that the one you had mutual enmity with him will turn as if he were a close friend. Probably hear this ayat all the time. But the following ayat, and one who is blessed with this attitude, as sabr, and who observes patience, and no one is blessed with this attitude but a man of good fortune. So it's saying if you do your part, that's going to work. You respond with something better, which is good, and then that person's going to want to be close to you. And the third ayah, and the stroke from shaitan should strike you, seek refuge with Allah, surely he is all hearing, all knowing. So again, if it doesn't go well, trust in Allah. Do your part, but trust in Allah. Now, there's the other side of that. So what happens when a non-Muslim has an encounter with a Muslim who's not observant and isn't really of a, you know, great character? That's not good. Brothers and sisters and my elders, that's not good. We have to really consider that. That's what I call anti-dawah. Because first impressions, they stick with people for a long time. So that's why we've got to lead the way, and we've got to help others in our community to not be that bad first impression. So we really have to push out of our comfort zones and reach out. That means doing more than just having an open house at the masjid. This is all good. You guys have done it. I'm here to help many times, but you know, the churches and the non-Muslims are very open for this and are already knocking on it, but it's not enough. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You've got to get out of the Dearborn zone. I'm sorry to say this. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but you've got to get out of this comfort bubble. You know, because there are people who have never met a Muslim. I'm going to give the example of Sterling Heights because this is where we live by, and we at Iona, and a lot of our congregations from Warren, it's from Hamtramck, it's from Detroit, some from Sterling Heights, but there's Muslims all over Sterling Heights, and we're the ones who are going out there and interacting with people. Sterling Heights, just so you know, it's almost 30% foreign born. It's made up of dozens of ethnicities, from Eastern Europeans to Asians to Arabs, you know, and we're out there making first contact. A lot of those people have never met a Muslim, and it's nearly 30% foreign born, believe it or not. People are very easy in this society to live in their own bubbles. They don't have to interact with people if they don't want to. So that's why it's crucial. We go out twice a year, help senior citizens through government, the city helps seniors with their cleanup of their lawn, mowing their lawns, trimming their bushes, whatever. We do it in fall and spring. We're the only Muslim group that does it. And I meet people never met a Muslim. Usually it's old people, changes their perception. Old white people, they love us. They ask for us now. And I've built these relationships over years now. We see these people everywhere. They get involved with interfaith, whatever. All we did was plant a seed. They see a bunch of brown people fixing up their lawn and stuff. They don't know. Wait till the end. I mention, oh yeah, well, we're from the mosque. What? You know, sometimes they have a negative reaction, but they can't. What can they do? Look at these people. They did good for me. They're volunteering. So volunteering is crucial. You guys need to get out there. There's many opportunities. So, you know, some ideas is, you know, you can look for the interfaith activities outside of Dearborn. Yeah, they go on here. Look for them outside. You know, find those volunteer opportunities, whether it's with food banks, soup kitchens, whatever, outside of Dearborn. Go where there's less Muslims, okay? Or maybe even just less Arab Muslims. I don't know. You know, join a gym in another area. Do your shopping in a shopping mall somewhere out in the suburbs, somewhere different, right? Because just that simple interaction with a clerk or whoever, you know, just that smile or whatever, just like the sister said, return a smile. Look people in the eye. Let them see the humanity. If you're just going to plant a seed, you're not going to, don't make your intention with Allah first before that opportunity comes up. Look for those opportunities when they do, then it's yours. Plant that seed. You're not going to see immediate results. That's okay. You're not doing it for that. But that person's going to consider, you know what, I see these people, they're like me. What's the difference? You know, it's not that hard, you know, but you can do it. So the last thing that I want to touch on, you know, we got to take those opportunities. But now the reality is, we are, as I would say, we're going to meet people who they just got hatred. They're not afraid of anything. They don't care. They've made up their conscious decisions. That whether it's ignorance, whatever, they've made that conscious decision. You know what? I don't like these people. You know, and they're going to throw their hatred at us. Okay, and we're going to have these situations. So what do we do there? Well, I like to reference early surahs for this. Surah Al-Muzammil, if you look at ayat 9 and 10. Allah is the Lord of the East and West. La ilaha illallah. So take Him for your wakil, for your guardian. And bear patiently with what they say and part with them in a beautiful manner. Don't debate people. It's not about debating people. This isn't what this is about. When you are dealt with hostility, you've got to do two things. You've got to not show fear. That's what they want to see. This is hatred. Shaitan feeds on the fear. Show confidence and courage. Confidence and courage. Okay? You're not harming anyone. They're coming at you. Don't return an evil deed with an evil deed. If they use hateful words, it's very easy, especially for us brothers, for Arabs, you know, we're hot-tempered. Don't return. Be calm, walk away. You know, or just say, you know, I don't have a problem with you. So, just remember, in addition, you know, you can call 911. There's no shame in that. And say, someone's threatening me because I'm Muslim. Do it. You know, a lot of you take self-defense classes. There's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, remember that we're Americans. We have Second Amendment rights. So, I'd like to wrap it up with that. We don't need to be apologetic for being Muslim, but we do need to be firm in our deen. And I ask your forgiveness if anything I've said is wrong and incorrect. Jazakallah khair for your time, and Allah protect us all from evil. Ameen.
Jazakallah khair for the panelists. I think I benefited a lot, and I have a lot of questions. If there's anyone that has a question, just there's cards around. There's some over here. They're usually probably like at the end of the seats. Just write your question on the card and just pick it up, and I'll have one of the youth members bring it up. So I'm going to start off with just asking. I want to kind of feel.
Just for a few, words.
I kind of want to make sure that the questions are appropriate.
Nobody's going to ask you.
Okay.
Some question from the one we talked about.
Are you guys comfortable with that, or would you rather have them ask, or would you rather have me read the question? Okay. All right. So let me start off with a few of the questions first. So I'll start with Sister Fatima. So should we defend or condemn any acts of terrorism? So let's say there's an act of terrorism and someone says, I apologize for that. Do you feel, that we should say, we're sorry for doing that, even though, we're not responsible for it?
times that's one of the toughest questions. It's tough because I've always struggled with it, to be honest. I remember in the young days, right, when you're a student activist and you're tough and you think you're big and bad, we're not apologizing for anything. You know, I remember thinking, it's not my problem. I don't need to be in apologetic mode. Some guy overseas does something. He didn't call us up here and ask our opinion. He's, a nut job. Why do we have to apologize for it? I think, though, this goes back to just a couple of things. I think this is a great, do I only have a minute for this question? All right. Two things. First off, it goes back to what somebody said about ikhlas and our own ibadah, etc. So it's okay, and I think a lot of our community leadership could benefit from this. It's okay to not have an answer, by the way. We don't always have to have the right answer. I think, to me, this is an illustration that there's two opinions. One is the young one I just kind of told you, which is we don't have to apologize. It's not our problem. We don't always want to be in apology, condemn mode. And the other philosophy is, well, the reality is the imagery of Muslimin all over the world is just horrible. You see a guy in a beard holding a Quran with a machine gun. Let's be honest. That's the imagery, right? And that's what people see. So there is an opinion that we should be, in order to most effectively get our opinion across and to push past the negativity, is to say, of course we condemn it, and let me tell you who we really are, Muslimin or X, Y, and Z. Or it's a given that we should condemn it, yes, and then to move past it. So to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what the right answer is, but I know that there are certainly problems associated with always having to condemn things. Like, why is it a given? When some white guy goes, the guy at Virginia Tech shot everybody up on campus, we knew he was a nut job, and there was a mental health problem. And all the social workers and mental health people said, oh my God, this guy has a psychosis. When a Muslim person does that, they expect, or people expect, all the Muslimin to say, we condemn him. Why is it not a given that we condemn him? When you turn on the news and somebody does a bank robbery, we don't ask every white person or every person associated with that to condemn it. We know it's a negative story, we know it's a given, and that's why it's called bad news. So I think there's two philosophies. I don't necessarily think that there's a right way. It's an issue of perspective and style. And Allahu A'lam.
Okay, next question is for Brother Dawood. If someone were to pull off a sister that's wearing her hijab in public, what is the immediate steps for her to take?
Sisters, if someone comes to you and is ripping off your hijab, first of all, you should yell and yell for someone's assistance. Hopefully someone comes to your aid. Sometimes people don't, but at least there's someone that you're getting their attention that might save you or help save you from bodily harm, because as pulling off your hijab is traumatic. There have actually been Muslim women who've been assaulted and hurt, and actually some have been killed, where it goes past an issue just of hijab. Then call 911 immediately regarding the authorities. Many of these places, and I would assume it's a public place where the hijab is getting ripped off. In many places or areas, there's cameras, right? Like our country is like swarming and saturated with cameras, so hopefully the authorities. But I would not get into, unless you are trained in self-defense. I wouldn't try to get into like a fist fight with some man who's trying to pull off your hijab. I would scream as loud as I could and call 911. You can also then afterwards contact a civil rights organization that you feel comfortable with, but the primary thing is to contact law enforcement. I also want to make one brief comment relating to the other one. I can't help myself, so after one, Brother Bilal, pardon me, excuse me. I want to pose a question back regarding that question. Muslims have been condemning terrorism since 9/11 till we've been blue in the face, and the opinion polls of Muslims have gotten worse. We have condemned everything every attack to be bulletproof. There are so many fatwa. Every major scholar in the world and in America, organization has condemned terrorism, and this condemnation has not helped us in the poll of public opinion one bit. So I just want to throw that out to you.
Next question is for Amanda. You mentioned that you had to deal with a lot of Islamophobic tweets on Twitter. What was maybe the most memorable tweet, whether it was something positive or negative that maybe stuck with you, that you could share if you don't mind?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So one of the most positive tweets that I received was actually from a Christian blogger who lived about 3 hours north of us in Washington State, and he had been watching MasterChef, came across my page and started tweeting, to me like, wow, this is so wonderful that you're doing this, and that you're cooking and sharing your faith with people. And he asked, once we started doing With Your Muslim Neighbor, he asked if him and his wife could join us. And we said absolutely. So I think that was one of the most positive experiences, and what I hope all interactions on Twitter could be, building that bridge, people, who are curious and willing to make the effort and the attempt to come down and share a meal with us and learn more about our Islam. His name is Jason Bradley, if you're interested in reading his work. He's quite critical of the church, and it was a great experience to know that someone from a different faith would find my presence on the TV show inspiring, so alhamdulillah. Some of the negative things, what I've learned with like these Twitter trolls is no one's usually not going to say these things to you in person, so it's best to just respond with kindness, and then, if they're still being hateful, I just, block and delete.
All right, this question is for Brother William. You mentioned about, Dawood mentioned about it's who you keep company with, right? And with your experience running the bookstore, have you ever had someone that came in with maybe wrong intentions, that had, like you said, these people that had pure hate, and maybe now you keep company with them where they're now your friends, they've learned really like the core essence of Islam? Have you ever had that instance where you had maybe someone that came in with very bad intentions and came out as a friend?
Well, we've had,
I do a lot of Iona.
I am actually one of the chaplains. I work with a lot of the new Muslims, and teaching them. But yeah, we have all kinds of interesting people. Having a bookstore and having a neon open sign is one of the greatest things, because people just stop in. Every masjid needs to work to make their place accommodating and transparent for visitors to come with rules. We don't exactly want people just walking in. That's why we have a bookstore. They can come, ask a Muslim, and say, well, hey, what are you guys about? But I've had people come who were either searching or had different ideas, who, we've had some of these poor people who call themselves Christians. It's very important to differentiate. When you meet someone, and especially in interfaith work, you have to look for people who are Presbyterians, Methodists, Lutherans. Maybe you might meet some friendly Catholics. If they say, well, I'm just Christian, that means they're usually following a Christian Zionist ideology, and they're going to be nice just to be nice to your face. They think we're completely off the wall or whatever. They already have a preformed opinion. Don't waste your time debating with them. I can't say there's anyone specific. I have changed some ideas. Some people, they don't like what they hear. They don't believe in the Trinity. So, you just make your intention. Our goal is not to get people to take Shahada. It's just to explain Islam. I can say, yes, we've made some friendly relations. So people contacted us through Facebook page. No one I can say that's super hard, unless they've accepted Islam and then they come to the masjid. We've seen that. I can't really say I've had massive hater come in the bookstore and then he's done 180, but we've had people come in, didn't know, or had negative things, but left and maybe contacted a few times and completely did change their opinion. But I can't say I've become buddies with them, or friends. But we've seen a lot of positivity from just being there. Again, I don't want to go over, but it's just the fact that, again, I'm American born, so I don't have an accent. So I know how to relate with people, get them to feel, oh, this guy's American. Okay, so he's not like this weird foreigner. I thought it was all this weird foreign stuff going on here. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? My name's William. You know? So,
I'm going to ask one more question for each panelist, and I'll open up for anyone in the audience that would like to ask. So this question is for Sister Fatina. You mentioned that you teach law. Do you ever have, so when you're doing this undoing of bias or defending in the introduction, what is the biggest, like, have you ever had like a student come after your class and say like, oh snap, I did not expect that to be like something in Islam. It's completely what I've, misinterpreted.
Yeah, I do. Particularly since the classroom is, like one of those spaces that Amanda talked about being healthy and safe. In fact, I encourage them, to write something out. I'll even swap it out for like a free day, for a free lecture. Let's get this out of the way. We'll do this, and in fact, we'll skip class one day or combine them. For people to write out with or without their names, and I actually appreciate people not putting their names on it, to really write out the ways in which they truly learned something that was not the case, or truly were transformed, ideally. That's what a classroom is supposed to do, but especially in the area of Islam, Islamic history, Islamic law. I mean, one thing is, even law students, I don't think people associate Islam with a sophisticated development of law and theology and history. I think they think it's just one book, which it is, it's the Quran, but I mean, Islam is also part of a wider civilization. Like civilization, meaning it went to the world and brought with it, the arts and the sciences. And like any other history, parts of Islamic history are shameful, parts of it are fantastic, parts of it, leave much to be desired. So what? Let's look at Christian history. I mean, so to answer your question, or biblical history, if you look at the Bible, particularly in Hebrew, if you read it in Hebrew, I mean, it's not the most peaceful book, right? So folks tended to point to the violent, quote unquote, violent verses of the Quran. But if you look at other faiths, I mean, there's like 80 verbs in Hebrew for smite, kill. I mean, Christian and biblical history is not the most peaceful history. That's not to say that this is to excuse away anything, but the point is, Bilal, and I think your questions are all excellent, that we aren't often given the appreciation of having a sophisticated tradition of kalam and, I mean, theology and law and history and philosophy. I mean, who would have thought, like random white people sitting in a law school class didn't know that Islam had a sophisticated philosophy of thinkers and doers and the like. So all that basically means is humanizing, exchanging over dinner or doing whatever, but perhaps on a higher intellectual level in the classroom. So the root of it is all the same, that the Muslims and their faith and their history are so dehumanized that we even forget that they come from this rich background. So yeah, to answer your question, I often ask people to share with them, share with the rest of us the ugly things that they have thought about Islam, and there's no shortage of them.
All right, this question is for Brother Dawood. So we got a lot of these like Twitter trolls that Sister Amanda was talking about. What is like the protocol, or like what steps should we take, even from like a dawah perspective, in dealing with these like really hateful comments about Islamophobia?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Surah Al-Ahraf, 199th ayah. That is the answer to this of the adab. Allah Azza wa Jal gives 3 commands in this ayah. Khudh al-'afw, wa'mur bil-'urf, wa'rid 'anil jahilin. 3 commands. First, when someone comes to you and you're being a little hostile, okay, well, you try to pardon them, maybe you give them the benefit of the doubt, and you can say something back perhaps that said, if they have a misperception or misconception, depends on the level of hostility. Okay, you pardon them for their ignorance, so you give them proper information, you try to give them the right information. If they then continue to be hostile, وَعَدْرِدْ عَلَى الْجَاهِلِينَ, you stay away from ignorant people. This is the protocol that we've been given by Allah Azza wa Jalla. This is our adab of how we deal with individuals who are hostile. 3 commands, Surah Al-Ahraf, the 199th ayah.
Okay, this question is for Sister Amanda. Now, I work at Access, where I deal closely with people that have a mental illness, and I help find them jobs. A lot of the social workers and therapists that I talk with, they say a lot of times people don't want to work with them because of their nationality. Like, oh, I don't want to work with this person because they're from Iraq, and I'm Iraqi, and stuff like that. So Brother William was speaking a lot about this, even, this asabiya where, inside of Islam, you have this Arab, like, I'm from Lebanon, I'm from Yemen kind of mentality. In your field of social work, have you ever had someone maybe didn't want to work with you, and if you have, how did you deal with that? And if you haven't, how would you deal with that?
So when I was a social worker in Seattle, I was working in the hospital, and the demographics of Seattle is mostly white. I think it's like 87% white for the city of Seattle, which is like significant. So I would walk into a patient's room, and a lot of times I would just introduce myself and be like, "Oh, thank you for coming. You're a social worker. You're here to help." But there was one family who immediately tried to stop, and I could tell from their body language that they were taken aback that it was a Muslim woman coming in as their social worker. And the son of the patient, who was elderly, had made a comment like, "Oh, I didn't expect that woman, in your religion could have a job and come in here." And I said, "Well, I do, and I'm here to help you, so, let's get back to that." But just that simple interaction and then seeing someone empowered in Islam, and it is a teachable moment. I think a lot of our existence and our roles that we play in society is combating the narrative that many people have and the perceptions that we have. But when you're there to help and you come with pure intentions, people can read that, and just doing what you need to do is really important. And I think the issue that many people hear, we do have a very proud community. They're proud of their nationalities, and unfortunately that translates to discriminating against others that might not be from the same place as us, and that's very problematic. And we need to do our job to reach out and combat these and create diverse spaces and build with our neighbors and friends who are Muslims from other communities. And I think that's the way that we can really affect change in our communities.
Awesome. Okay, one more question for Brother William, and then I'll open up for anyone in the audience to ask questions. So Sister Fatima mentions that we have to be agents of our faith. And sort of by our actions is one way that we can combat Islamophobia. Can you say maybe one time, one instance that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dealt with Islamophobia? Like what did he do when people said, I hate your religion? How did he deal with it? Maybe not like one particular instance, like this is exactly, but maybe by his character, how did he deal with people that hated on his beliefs? Like maybe.
Well, yes. So in Taif, we know that. He was given the option, according to the Hadith, from I believe it was one of his wives narrated what he had said about it. But the angels came to him and gave him the option to destroy the people, and he said no. I will pray for them because someone from their lineage may become someone who is a purveyor of Islam, promotes Islam, which actually happened, right? So, that was a huge story for me. And this is, of course, like one of the most beautiful, gracious things. And that to me says a lot about planting a seed and just generations after generations you will see. But there's the other extreme too that sometimes I mention. Again, I don't know, I believe it's a fairly factual narration, but we know about the incidents where animal entrails were thrown on him. So there was one, and again, I relate to this one because of my personal times of having to deal with it in my own family and amongst others, is when this happened one time, one of his neighbors family members was throwing garbage or entrails in front of his door, and he just, he called like, you're of my tribe. Like, basically said, we're from the same family. What are you doing? That's essentially what he was saying. So he was calling it out, and he was taking the high road to a degree, but he was calling it out. It wasn't just like, turn the other cheek. He said, are we not from the same tribe? We're from the same family. What are you doing? I can't relate it indeed exactly, but maybe you know what I'm referencing. So he was calling it out. He was basically saying, hey, are you daft of reason? Look at what you're doing to your own family. So that I like to use because this is how we dealt with 2 different ways. When that great situation, he prayed for them. Well, Muslim family? You know, you don't. So you kind of like with reason. What are you doing? What are you thinking? Nothing wrong with that. Asking people, what's wrong with you? You know, there's nothing wrong with us as Muslims. We're not harming anybody. There's something to ask them. What is wrong with you? What is your reason? If you see that they have some. If they don't, walk away.
Any questions for the audience? Yes, please. Oh, by the way, just a rule of thumb for the questions, please keep them very super duper short, and make sure they're questions and not just like statements or things like that. Make sure they're actual questions. Okay, yes.
Actually, it's not a question, but it's thanks for Mr. Fatih. I'm supporting her speech about to correct some concepts of formation which written in our textbooks in schools. Like I work with the schools, I work with students in many schools here in states or in Michigan, and also with youth in different parts of the world to promote peace, understanding each other, culture, accept other people cultures. So what Ms. Fatina mentioned, that some books in the schools were taught in our schools has some information right, some information wrong about Islam, Christianity. So when I look at them, for example, social studies, language arts, middle school students books, so oh, this is what you call it, has a harmony with what Islamic rule says, or others are different. So the people who wrote this books or posted or published this books, they don't have really a big idea about Islam and Muslims. So I'm supporting what Ms. Fatina says about like correct these concepts. People who did this, they have lack information, even the people who teach in schools or who written these books. And yeah, we find this information online, posted online, published, written, and we need to discuss this with our students, the curriculum in schools. This is the most important point. I think takes context. Even families at home, they can look at their history books with their kids at home. They say, oh, my kids, my boy, my girl, come on, I want to see what you study today in school. Let me see, they teach you about Islam, about Christianity, about Judaism, about all different religions in the world, Hinduism. So if something wrong you see is not like go with our concepts and idea about Islam, make corrections. Let your kids know this is right, this is wrong, so they don't grow up, as Ms. Fatina said, they grow up with just information they know in the book or in the TV or online on Facebook or other social media. So thank you so much.
Like maybe the good question would be if someone suffers from maybe Islamophobia, whether it's from like a textbook or maybe they see like what correct action should they do?
So, I mean, this goes back to reporting and why our organizations are important. You know, even if you have an assignment that is not, you know, unfair, okay, or misportrays Islam or Muslimin, you correct it, say, with the teacher, but why is it still crucial? You know, nobody wants to get their kid on the hook. Nobody wants to report it to organizations like Emma and like other ones because, you know, you don't want nobody wants to be like, what, exposed. But it's so crucial that you do because when we get these reports, now we know that teacher X in certain, and say, I always say Livonia as an example, I don't know, teacher Smith at Livonia School District messed up. And maybe she corrected the record. They usually don't, but let's assume she does. Now we have in our file the idea that Livonia is sloppy or teacher Ms. Smith, and we were able to look for patterns. Because I assure you, where there's mix-up or where there's hatred towards us in one area, it's usually everywhere else. So if it's in a particular school district, it's not just that principal usually, and maybe from the school board themselves, they might have somebody that is pushing anti-Muslim sentiment. Or if you report something, goes back to the reporting. If you have a problem at the airport and you don't report it, even if they let you in eventually, everyone's like, alhamdulillah, I got in, khalas, they don't want to do anything. The problem is we don't then have the statistics, so when we do sit with law enforcement, we'd say, hey, don't give us that BS that, you know, you're friendly to Muslims when they land here, because we know, flan, alan, we know all the names and numbers, and we don't have to provide them, right? It's confidential. I'm a lawyer. If you report something to me, it's all confidential. But I promise you, it's your obligation to report every little thing, even if you think it's small, because then we can take that information and we're better able to warn, say, the community, and we don't ever use your name if you don't want us to, etc. So the third way I just want to tell you, it's funny you talk about textbooks and we jump to law enforcement, But even reports if the FBI has come to visit you, okay? I've said it a zillion times, you do not talk to them. They're not there usually as your friend. They're there to acquire information. So it's not تعزمهم عشاء اتفضلوا. There's no اتفضلوا for the FBI, okay? There's I don't want to talk to you until I get a lawyer. It's that simple. It's like as American as apple pie, to use the expression, is to get a lawyer. You're able to get a lawyer. There's a reason you're supposed to get a lawyer. So anyway, the point of that is, so even if you get out of that, you hire a lawyer or you call an organization, when you report that the FBI is probing certain questions of you, that's just phishing. How many times a day you pray, what's your political belief, you know, all the unlawful stuff. When you report it, we then can warn different community members. We then can look at trends and patterns of what's happening so as to best, you know, defend and advocate for our community. I mean, what's a mu'assasa supposed to do? What is MN supposed to do? What are these organizations supposed to do? They're supposed to take a leadership role in advancing the needs of our community. We're only as good as the information that the school teacher or the principal or the lady landing at Metro Airport or the person getting on an airplane. You're only as good as a small incident you report us or the big stuff, because usually it's all the little small stuff when combined that is suggestive of an underlying pattern of mistreatment towards our community. So that's my push for reporting.
I have an additional comment on the textbook issue real quick, though we've dealt with this numerous times. There are innocent teachers who use textbooks because this is what the entire district uses. Then there are actual textbook companies who knowingly print misinformation about Muslims and Islam. So it's not that they don't have information, they have an agenda. Many of these textbooks are printed from Texas. And there are certain publishers who have an anti-Muslim or more so like conservative type of evangelical agenda. So we dealt with this last year where we had to meet with the actual school board of Troy to get one particular history book pulled in Kiev, Michigan, because it was an issue. It just wasn't like they're naive and don't know about Islam. No, they actually have a type of evangelical agenda that's not just against Muslims too. There'll be other things that they have that are in there. It's reflective of a worldview, and it's something that's not just as simple as you writing individually a book publisher. There has to be an organization that's involved, that actually has experience to deal with this and knows how to interrupt this type of agenda.
Can we get a sister first, and then we'll come back to the guy's side. Any questions on the sister side? Who has a question? Just raise your hand. I think Saif has a question. I saw his hand first.
Yeah. Actually, I have questions to Brother William. Actually, I worked at the Ford Motor Company, and they have a lot of conversations with employees, American employees. So, you know, they watch the Fox News. So, what do you think? What's the best way to explain to them the media is exaggerate and they didn't tell the truth about the Muslims? So
okay, well, that's a very good question. So there's two ways to look at how, you know, alhamdulillah, we have laws in this country, religious freedom. And once an employer, and I used to, my days in the private sector, I used to teach EEOC, procedure law to middle managers. But once a company allows you to pray or observe some sort of religious observance, they have to let you continue to do it. So companies like Ford, and we know because in Warren we have all the automakers around us. We have GM, we have Ford, we have whoever, Chrysler particularly. A lot of these places, you know, they do two things. So they accommodate Muslims a lot because they definitely, because they hire all the IT engineers. Everyone's Muslim or Indian or whatever. So they make a prayer space, they allow you to come for prayer or whatever. But at the same time, yeah, you've got people that, you know, are going to take their information and whatever, and maybe use it in a biased way. So the way is to direct them to, again, you don't want to debate with people, but use resources. So one of the things I brought today is some information that's specifically targeting for this from a company or a group called Sound Vision. This is a great initiative here in the U.S. It's been around for a long time. Imam Malik Mujahid, maybe you're familiar with him. So their work now specifically is, they do a lot of things, but they're working on PR, public relations. They're hiring a big DC firm, And they put out literature, which we have displayed in the back, that can help you, again, use it for the right situation to help, show what Islam says about what Daesh is doing and what is correct and not correct. So, you don't want to get into, because everybody knows Fox News is Fox News. I ask those people who believe in that, you can't argue that it's against reason. If they already think there's something reasonable about Fox News, you're not going to show them anything different, but you can give them information. Well, this is what I know. This is what I was taught. I'm a living, breathing Muslim. That's all you have to say. You don't have to be apologetic, but look at the literature in the back. And what you will surprise them with is a literature that shows that Islam is part of our history, as far as there's the one pamphlet shows the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is honored in the Supreme Court. I don't know if you knew that, look at the pamphlet. Also in the Library of Congress. Also in the Smithsonian Institute, you'll find lots about Islamic history. You'll find Quran rewritten from a Muslim slave, by memory, a Quran. You'll find all kinds of, Islam is part of you. And once they learn that, what can they say? How are they going to call you an outsider? Hey man, Thomas Jefferson had a Quran. There's one of the books I've referenced, Thomas Jefferson's Quran by Denise Spelberg. Came out a couple years ago. Great book. Founding fathers knew all about Islam. Part of their ideas in designing the government here. Any questions on this side? Yes?
For William again, is there a book that you recommend to give non-Muslims as a gift? Like sometimes you have people asking, questions that I can't always answer.
All kinds of books. But some top ones I would recommend, depending on what you want to do. If you want to talk about overall history, 1001 Inventions, the National Geographic book, this is phenomenal. Everyone of us should have this in our home, and we should look forward to the exhibition that's coming here in fall. If you guys didn't know about it, it's going to be at Detroit Science Center. It's going to take up the entire second floor. You guys should look for it. We're still trying to raise funds for it, so it's free for all school kids to go. But outside of the 1001 Inventions, I would recommend there are several books on Muslim American history. A good comprehensive one called Muslims in American History by Gerald Dirks. He was a Christian pastor who became a Muslim, and he writes lots of books on this. So that's a pretty comprehensive one. And then again, Thomas Jefferson's Quran by Denise Spelberg. These are great books. You can give them as gifts. There's nothing like, it's for every audience.
Okay, Chef, you had a question?
اسمحوا لي, I can understand you, but my Arabic not perfect. My question by Arabic. أنا إمام for 15 years in Arab country. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما هي أسباب الإسلاموفوبيا في اعتقادي كإمام كداعية؟ 3 أشياء. أولا شبهات في العلم. بعض الناس، بعض التيارات، بعض الجماعات ما تعلم بشكل صحيح فينتج عنه سلوك غير صحيح. كل اعتقاد خاطئ ينبني عليه سلوك خاطئ كما يعرف الأساتذة يعني. الشيء الثاني بعض السلوكيات الخاطئة من البعض ليس الكل. يعني نفترض مثلا 20% يعني يعمل له سلوكيات خاطئة فيفهمها الناس عن الإسلام بشكل خاطئ فيخافوا منه. ثالث شيء عدم التواصل مع المجتمع. أنا مش لوحدي، يعني أنا في العالم في الأبيض والأسود والمسلم وغير المسلم، لابد في مساحة من التواصل بينه وبينه حددها الإسلام بشكل يعني آدمي. السؤال لحضراتكم، هل منحنا من حولنا سلوكا بالإسلام الحقيقي؟ بس شكرا. anyone can بلال can make translation. خليتني في الآخر. الله يسامحك.
Did you understand that question? And
he will translate. He will translate.
You want to meet face Imam, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Professor Saab, Wayne County Community College. I have a lot of experience about Sister Fatina. But back to the question. Imam said there are 3 reasons for Islamophobia. The first one, ambiguity about the knowledge, not knowing the real Islam. The second one, and miscommunication, misunderstanding. That's number 1. He's talking about the real Islam, ilm sahih. Number 2, some misbehavior, the way we're dealing with others, misconduct. Number 3, miscommunication with the surrounding, society. So his question, do we get to have around us the real communication in behavior to deal with the surrounding society and showing the real reality of Islam?
It's my question.
I'll add on something, and maybe you missed it, but it is my opinion that the roots of Islam, of Islamophobia in America, is not majority grounded in people misunderstanding Islam. And I will give you an historical example going back to the Prophet ﷺ. Quraysh in Mecca knew the character of Nabi Muhammad ﷺ. They knew him as Sadiq al-Amin. And they fought him to the bitter end until Fatih Mecca. It was an issue of positional power. Those people, the status quo who held political power, did not want to relent and did not want to submit to the new type of framework and the new type of lifestyle and social norms, the new social structure that Nabi Muhammad ﷺ was trying to implement. And they knew no one was more trustworthy than him. They trusted him 100%. No one can convey Islam better in Mecca than Nabi Muhammad ﷺ. No one had better adab. And with all this beautiful adab, with all these beautiful words, with him reciting the Quran, the best of mankind, and those people fought him to the bitter end because they were part of the status quo, they did not want to relinquish, and they saw him as a socio-political as well as an economic threat. So there are, as I agree that sometimes Muslims misconvey Islam, that sometimes we have bad manners, Muslims, if you look at crime statistics, Muslims of any religious group have the lowest rates of violent crime than any group. We are the most tax-paying, most observant Americans, even with the bad stuff going in Dearborn. We have some shabab who are abusing pills and doing heroin. Even with that, even with some of the bad adab that Muslims have, it is nowhere as worse than the average American community religious group. So I'm saying what to say that I think that Islamophobia is a root going back up. So I think it's larger than from a structural position of them just not understanding. We can talk about Isa alayhi salam, and we believe in Isa too, just like you, and we have a whole chapter called Maryam and the conception or the birth and convey it to the people. I'm not so convinced that that would chip away at a majority of the Islamophobia in America. Wallahu a'lam.
I think that's good for questions.
Media,
Yeah, the media is
media is the problem to discuss. We didn't have any media in Arabic. Right. Come with them. No, that's the problem. The media in the U.S.
Let's do one more question for the sisters, and then we'll open up for closing statements. And yes.
My question is for Amanda. How do you say, I guess, break the ice between you and your neighbor? So, like, you know, you're not going to go and invite them for dinner all of a sudden. So, like, how do you break the ice?
That's a great question for those that didn't hear. How do you?
Hello?
So how do you break the ice with your neighbor? I can just talk really well. How do you break the ice with your neighbor? Because you're not just gonna like go over and say, "Hey, come over for dinner," and like have you. I think as a society, we're very individualistic, and that's promoted in this capitalist American society. And we tend to grab our groceries, and as we're unloading, we zip through the house without saying hello. How are you, neighbor? Whereas maybe 50 years ago in America, you go over to your neighbors and ask them for an extra egg while you're baking a cake and you're short. We've kind of strayed away from that now. So I think the simple day-to-day interactions will help lead to a relationship where you can feel comfortable to invite someone over. And I think that takes effort, and it takes work, and it takes us being vulnerable and okay with getting a little uncomfortable having these conversations. So make the effort. I mean, stop, hi, how was your day? Actually get to know their names. I mean, so many of us live next door to people for many years and don't even know their names. And that's not okay. That's not, the teachings of our religion and, what our prophets and imams came down to do. So we need to make the effort to really get to know them. While we're fasting, there was a Muslim sister in California, and she has a blog, and during Shahr Ramadan every year she explains what it means for Muslims during this month and just takes them a small gift like cookies and dates and says, we're fasting during this month and this is what we're observing. Thank you for being our neighbor, and this is, part of our faith, and one of our tenets is to share and get to know our neighbors. So I think we need to slowly break the ice and then make the invitation to dinner, inshallah.
So, with that being said, I'll open up for closing statements. Brother Dawood, would you like to go first?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Just to reiterate what I said, that when we are dealing with anything in our society, that we have ikhlas, we have sincerity, and when we open up our doors to greet people, feed people, or do community service, we should do this for the rida of Allah Azza wa Jal, and we leave the results to Him. We don't do it as thinking that primarily so we can get people to accept us. I think this is very important. This is the key. We leave the results in the hands of Allah. We do what is pleasurable, and by a consequence, or perhaps those people's hearts will soften, perhaps they won't. Perhaps Allah will send us help through a different means. And I just have to say to remind us that Allah Azza wa Jal says this in the Quran. He reminded our Prophet ﷺ about this in Al-Medina. And again, I say this, there is no one who can convey Islam more eloquently than the Prophet ﷺ. No one's adab. Our adab can never be as good as him 24/7. We can never be as eloquent as him. Even his physical beauty, none of us can look as handsome as he did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah Azza wa Jal told him, وَلَنْ تَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ. Never will all the Jews nor all the Christians be pleased with you until you follow their way. So it's not rida for people, it's rida for, we seek rida of Allah Azza wa Jal.
So I just wanted to review to everyone how we should really look at how we need to go about this. We got to look at ourselves first. Know thyself. Okay, we got to know ourselves as Muslims. Learn our deep, be confident. But that shouldn't stop us from going to the next level. Looking at our community. How do we unite and break down these walls in our community? Because they're there, and you guys got to know they're there. Okay, let's stop saying, okay, yeah, we know it's there. Let's do something about it. And then thirdly, how do we project out? You gotta do what the Quran says. Do as much as you can. Meaning, what you're able to do. You don't have to go out and debate with people and be Mr. Scholar or something. Just show good character. Know your deen, knowing yourself, projecting it out, being part of the society. Accept that you're American. You are. You can't take that away because they're trying to take that from you. You're citizens. Even if you're not citizens, you live here, you're Americans. Period. You know your history. Islam is grounded in our society. It is. It's not a far-reaching concept. It is. This country is made up and it's built on, of course, as Dawood said, white supremacy. We're here today, I'm here today, I'm going to throw in a side note, because Syrians and Lebanese, at some point there was a legal case where they were considered, well, okay, they're white, right? That's part of the reason why I'm able to succeed. But believe me, the white people know. Are you Italian or what's that? What the nose and what's the... They know, okay? I'm proud to say I am. And my name's Wood. And I know somebody whose name's Mike. And I know a Bridget. And they're all Arab. Okay? So take ownership of it. That's always my final comment when I talk. Take ownership of who you are as a Muslim and as an American. It's okay. You're not betraying anything. Islam, this country is built on many things. Islam is part of it. Wallahi. And also, be aware of other things. Like I said, I mentioned Sound Vision. There are many organizations that are working the other angles, looking at the big picture, the PR, as the brother said, the media, these things. Please get the information, look at the booklets explaining all that they do. And they're mostly made up of people who are of Pakistani and Indian origin, but they're reaching out and they go out and they do many things. And so when they come around and do fundraisers here in Michigan, put your money towards that too. It's well worth it. They're doing good work. Jazakallah.
Mashallah, the panel is excellent, covered a lot of anything I could contribute. Know your history, as he said, because I promise you somebody else is writing it, somebody else is teaching it, somebody else is learning it. Your history and your language. When I mean language here, Arabic is, for all intents and purposes, it's the language of the Quran, and any full, proper pursuit of our deen, would require, or at least have very useful to it, the Arabic language. So very, very important. And I absolutely love, Brother William, that there are no flags in the hereafter. I'm going to be using that. I think that's
something maybe in Jahannam.
Allahu Alam. Yeah, I mean, and he talked about the flags of nationalism. How about the flags that, the proverbial flags we have of, I'm going to be a dentist, or I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to be a business person, I'm going to drive a fancy car, and this and that, right? Those flags, those categories aren't going to matter there either. And while all the young people, mashallah, are getting very educated and doing great things, remember, whatever you end up doing, whatever profession you end up, is only as good as your ability to serve this community, to serve as a citizen in America, etc. I mean, to serve. So all those labels aside aren't going to matter when it's said and done. And that is one thing about our deen that we're all on the same page about. And hereafter, that's going to fall by the wayside, and nobody will care how many square foot that house was or the fanciness of that car. And I think that's a real conversation that we can have with ourselves and for ourselves. So Islamophobia, very real. And to report it doesn't mean you're a victim. Some people don't want to, particularly with Arab, right? We don't want to report something because we feel like it means like we've been defeated, or that, there's like an aib in it, right? Or that there's some type of, it's just not cool to do. No, you tally statistics, because when we are victimized, we report it. So you report every instance of discrimination. I know MN wants to hear it, other organizations want to hear it. That's the best way we're able to serve you. And the most important thing also is get involved with your Masjid. I mean, Salat al-Jum'ah is great, but some of us, I think, only know anything about our mosque, only about the Salat al-Jum'ah. I mean, the mosque these places need to be institutions that we bring our kids to, that we're involved in, that we support, that we're not only critical, right? Because we love to be critical from far away. Everybody has an opinion, right? And sometimes we don't know how difficult it is, as I started out by saying, to put together these events, to run a mosque, to do these kinds of things. So the Masjid, the Muassasat, whatever their organization, your leaders are only going to be as good as your involvement with them. And they're only going to be as good as the input you provide. So we all have to be in this thing together, and Jazakumullah khair for listening.
Thank you guys all for being here, for sharing the panelists. It was an honor being up here with you guys, so I really appreciate it. In closing, I just want to say I hope that all of us know that there's always something we can do, and we should never lose that hope. And I hope that we as a community and as an ummah can be proactive instead of reactive. I think a lot of times, there's catastrophic events, and then we see a rise in people getting involved in their communities, and then we get a little stagnant when things are good, and we just kind of coast through. So we need to make that effort at all times, and be proactive and reach out, and definitely leave our bubbles, leave Dearborn, leave our little circles, our safety nets that we've created for ourselves, and reach out to those who have not met a Muslim before. I think that's key. And part of our journey as Muslims through this life is their struggle. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that with every difficulty there is a relief. So inshallah we will achieve that. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Everyone, thank you all for coming. Just a quick reminder, I'd like to give a big thanks to all of our panelists, Executive Director from Aman, Sister Fatima, Executive Director, Brother Dawood from CARE, Director of Outreach, Brother William from Iona, and Sister Amanda, Social Work from Zaman. Please accept these gifts that we will be giving you after the panel. And please make sure to sign in, and if you'd like to receive any text updates or email alerts, there's sign-ins at both doors. And please make sure you take Batlawa, because I don't want to take any home because I'm starting my diet tomorrow. So, jazakallah khair for coming, and